What's up, Panda Nation? Peter Von Panda here. Hey, look what I got. I finally got my Vostok straight from Russia. And this is how it came. Like I said, paid about 60 or 70 bucks for it. And it is one of the amphibians. And the reason I picked this up was because when we were talking about it on the live chat, the information that I got sent and read up on, the amphibian is really kind of the bread and butter model. And now, this isn't going to be very useful to me. Minravitsa instructions. But I think what we can do here is kind of figure out this Vostok on our own. And I am going to go into some detail on it. This might be a little longer because we're going to kind of tear this thing apart too. Now, I did in my other review talk to you about Vostoks, and kind of from what I understood about the history of the company. I will reiterate some of that as we take a look at this amphibian here. But it was essentially the watch designer and manufacturer for military watches, for the Russian government. And the problem is that kind of the requirements were pretty much the same as all watch companies, to have very good water resistance, to be very durable, to keep accurate time. And unlike Swiss watch companies, the Russian companies didn't really have the precision tooling and the precision manufacturing required to really make watches in the same way that the Swiss companies were making. So Vostok was really innovative and kind of over-engineered things and really used what they had in a way that maximized each of the components' capabilities. So the first thing is, I think, really that you got to call out here is the movement. We're going to open up the back and take a look at that. They do make an automatic movement. It apparently keeps pretty good time. I have heard of some kind of interesting things that it does. You can see here it is a sweeping seconds hand. So it is automatic, and I haven't wound it even. Screw down crown. So it, when it got shipped here, I'm sure it got wound up pretty well. So you can see it's sliding pretty nicely. Now they have a lot of kind of built-in forgiveness, and I've even heard, and I'm going to be a little more abusive with this one, that you can really knock a Vostok and it will even stop timing on the second hand. Now the watch is still keeping time, but apparently, like, to have it kind of pause is one of the features of the watch. It's just kind of the way the movement is built. So I don't know if I'll be able to get it to do it here. Oh, I think I kind of did. Might only happen there for a split second, but I can feel the rotor inside moving when I do that, and I may be just abusing this thing. There, see, okay. The second hand paused, and I think that's kind of one of the things that can happen when the watch gets shocked. So it'll keep running. Now, I know some watches like the ball watches, have kind of anti-shock technology built into them, but this is pretty innovative for, I think, when it was, designed and built. The other thing that I think Vostok was known for is like the crystal. Now it's an acrylic crystal. I think I misspoke in my last video, but you can see how thick it is. It's very domed, and the reason is because they weren't using a mineral crystal or sapphire, which is going to be stronger. What they wanted to do is shape the crystal in such a way that water pressure was going to kind of smash it into the bezel and create a really tight seal, which is why the crystal is domed so much, right? So as the water pressure builds up, obviously a dome or a curved design is structurally very strong, but as the water pressure pushes on this, it's kind of flattening out that crystal and kind of crushing it into what I believe is underneath here, like another O-ring, or maybe it's O-ring against metal, I'm assuming, and you can it kind of makes it more water resistant the deeper you go, theoretically. It's kind of like, the movie The Core, where the more pressure that's on the unobtainium, the stronger it gets and the more energy it puts out, and other crap like that. But as you can see here, a rotating bezel, but not a clicking rotating bezel, and it's bidirectional. So, maybe a little unsafe because you would maybe put this, to line up with your minute hand so that you count off 15 minutes for scuba diving, because it is an amphibian watch. And there are some Scuba watches, when we checked out Aaron Dunlop's Scuba Dude watch. But so you can knock it and maybe run out of time, or maybe to have shown too much time. I don't know that that's a huge problem, but it doesn't have kind of the clicking bezel that a lot of divers watches that you might think of today would have. Now, what's kind of interesting is if you look at the bezel itself, it does have like this coin edge, but it's a really flat bezel. As you can see here, it kind of comes to a point, so you can get a really good grip on it, but it feels almost like a really thin gear when you're grabbing it, because look at how much it cuts in there. So it's kind of very flat and pointy, which is pretty different from, I think, other divers type of watches. 200-meter water resistant, which is pretty deep. So the crystal is one component of that. Now, the problem with acrylic is that they can kind of haze up, scratch up, fog, that type of thing. So traditionally on vintage watches, these acrylic crystals don't look that great. But as you can see here, polished bezel, painted or enameled numbers and hash marks, and then even little blue, kind of a lighter blue than the dial, which is kind of more of a real. I mean, it looks maybe a little purple on the screen. It has a little bit of hint of purple to me, but it's kind of like a dark blue, maybe just skewing a little purple. So I might wear this to Northwestern football games, just FYI. Polished case, beautiful. Not a very big watch, and relatively small. I think there are a few different models of these, and kind of the case shape changes a little bit, but it's is it a 40 millimeter case, maybe something like that. I'll roll in the number if it's wrong, but I think it looks pretty nice and shiny. And I got this one because obviously I love blue, and so blue's my color. And I hunted down this one. I thought if I'm going to have a Vostok for my collection, I'd like it to kind of fit my style. Pretty small, and as you can see, it's on this rubber band with some waves in there, and perforated down here. Nice, pretty low quality stainless steel polished buckle. Not a bad buckle, but nothing special about it. A couple of retention clips here. I do like, this is kind of a standard Casio sport watch look, and then the perforations down here, especially on like a rubber silicone band like this to help it breathe, is pretty nice. Now, water can get into a watch in the back too, and this is where they were really kind of innovative, is that what I talked about here is that most watch backs, as the case backs, you screw them on, there's an O-ring, and so what you're doing is you're compressing the O-ring and you're shearing the O-ring. So you're pressing down on it, but then you're also twisting that O-ring as you're putting down the screwing on the back. And because they couldn't, I guess, machine the metal to be super tight and then have, really tight O-rings, really, accurate O-rings or precise O-rings too, what they did is they created a two-piece back to kind of solve the problem. Now it creates more hardware, but it does remove the shearing problem of an O-ring. So basically what they have here is a flat rubber gasket, and then a back that just drops in, this middle piece, and that just compresses the O-ring and makes it very watertight, but you don't have to worry about it twisting. Then this ring on the outside is a separate ring that creates the pressure to screw it down. It's kind of like a nut, and so you only have pressure, no shearing, and then you have the second piece. So you actually have two metal pieces, a rubber gasket, and so it can be very, very watertight, and yet, it's pretty ingenious how they do it over a single piece. Now, I do have my backing removal tool here, because we are going to take this off because this is mine. So we will take a look at all of that, and let's do that now. So I've unscrewed it, and as you can see here, this ring comes off, and it's just like that nut as it screws down. See the threading on the outside. It's pretty thin. It's quite a bit smaller than I thought it would be. I'm pretty light, and you can see where the notches are there to unscrew it. But this just kind of unscrews, and now you can lift out the back of the watch, right? So you can, this piece here will just lift up, and there is a notch and a tab here on the top and the bottom so that it's going to be aligned. That's going to also keep it from twisting as you're tightening down that locking nut. And so you can see here, it's basically kind of like a cap. And I can kind of see, you can see machining marks, and maybe that was the issue on the Vostoks that, you know, there were going to be machining and tooling marks. So you can see there's a couple of ridges right on the edge of it. And I think that's going to help create kind of a couple of concentric circles, pressure points on the rubber gasket right there. Now you can see that gasket all the way around the movement, and it's a pretty flat, wide gasket. Now, if you've ever looked in the back of, you know, other watches like, you know, Breitling's or, you know, you probably have just a very thin O-ring, or the Tag Heuers or whatever. And that's, you know, this is going to be a big difference. Look how wide it is. Now, here's where you can see the automatic movement. Looks pretty standard to me. It's sitting in a kind of a plastic spacer in there. There is like a cutout, a skeletonized bee. Someone can tell me what that means. But yeah, it looks pretty good. I don't like having these things open for too long, but you know, exposed to the air and me and things like that. But you know, there you can see the automatic movement. Now, to reinstall this is just doing the same thing backward. I guess I can't tell really what's up and down. So you just put this back in there, and then you're going to put this ring back on and start tightening it down. And so that's a, I think, pretty good look of, you know, how the backing mechanism works on the Vostoks kind of universally, and how they're very different from other watches. Now that we've seen the inside and the guts, I kind of want to show you the last thing that I've heard that's unique about them. As you can see here, crown protectors, really polished case, polished crown right there. And it's more of like a cap than it's connected to the crown. And this is where it also gets maybe a little bit interesting, is that screw down crown, obviously. But what they're known for is that the cap, you know, people will talk about how loose they are, you know, or they feel. Look at how it kind of flops around. Now this is by design too, and it's for waterproofing apparently. So really, you know, where the crown is often kind of a single piece on a lot of watches, or for the most part kind of like a single piece, the crown and the cap here are, or the post I should say, are like a couple of separate pieces. So it's kind of just attached here, and really this piece works as a cap more than anything else, and that's why it kind of flops around really loosely, as you can kind of see. I don't know, it's kind of, I keep catching the threads. So much more so than other watches. But, you know, it does work like any other crown once you get it out far enough to set the time. And you can see here, I can set the time for whatever I need it to be. And then you screw it in. And then when you kind of screw it in, what ends up happening is, what I think it's kind of like a little clutch. My assumption is that there are gears or teeth like kind of on the bottom of the crown. And so when you put it all the way in, the cap and the crown kind of disconnect from each other. Kind of like, I think, like child-proof prescription bottles, where you push down and they kind of mesh up. And so when it's screwed in, I think the cap is now kind of disconnected from the crown. I don't know that for sure. I'd love to see a schematic on it, but that's just how I get the feeling that it is. And that's kind of to keep the whole movement and the post and everything kind of disconnected from the outside shocks to the watch itself, right? So let's just kind of finish up by taking a look at the rest of the watch here. We have luminous pips here, and most of the hour markers, kind of a big 12 and 6 in silver, looks like it's screen painted on, and then that blue dial. As you can see here, you know, it looks like applied polished markers. Now, even though they're applied, they're just like flat sheet metal, you know, so there's nothing, you know, maybe remarkable or particularly beautiful about them. Typically they'll be more relief, kind of thicker, taller, more distinct on watches that are supposed to be more luxury watches. These are, again, more utilitarian. It's like they applied them, but did so in a way that it's not for art. It's just to create some contrast. You know, silk screened white hashes at the minutes, and then, you know, typical divers watches with a very long triangular end on the hour hand here, and then kind of that singular pip on the seconds hand. So I do think, and I'll roll in some footage here of it in the dark. There's that loom on it, but we'll see for ourselves. But what I've also heard is that the loom from some of these Vostoks was not particularly great. It worked, but it certainly isn't as good as kind of modern loom. And even for watches at the time, it was adequate. I think that this is a modern produced watch. Someone might be able to help me out with that. You know, it seems like it's all brand new, but it seems like it was just done in with the same methods and in the same way that the original watches were done. But someone who's more familiar with Vostok can correct me on that. So there it is. That's my Vostok. That's what I wanted to show you. Pretty unique company, pretty interesting watches. I'm looking forward to having this watch and having someone one day maybe ask or point out as I'm wearing it, is that a Vostok? And kind of really see and who knows what they are, because I'll be honest, I haven't been into watches for a few years. I had never heard of it until you guys brought it up, so I appreciate that. Peter Von Panda, out.